As we kick off Autism Awareness Month, Easterseals Arkansas would like to welcome you to our very special webinar series, The Race for Understanding. We're excited to bring you this three-part series hosted by Easterseals Arkansas CEO Ron Ekstrand, featuring special guest Aaron Likens. Aaron serves as the Autism Ambassador for various Easterseals affiliates, is the author of the book Finding Kansas, and is currently living his dream as a flagman for the NTT IndyCar Series. During this webinar series, Aaron will share his advice, insights, and personal experiences of living on the autism spectrum, covering three different topics: education, employment, and independent living. In this third and final webinar of the series, we'll focus on independent living in autism, where Aaron will share what it has been like living and traveling on his own. His insights will be useful to those still living at home, their parents, and the community in general. We'll also open up the discussion for a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please send us your questions in the Q&A tab. Thank you for joining us, and please enjoy this insightful discussion.
Good evening and welcome to our third and final installment of our series, A Race to Understanding. I am Ron Ekstrand, CEO for Easterseals Arkansas, and with me today is our very special guest, Aaron Likens. We're going to have a little conversation here that we're going to invite you to join us later tonight, having Q&A. I'm getting a signal here. Is there something wrong? Okay. We're live, so we're working out a few of the logistics here, so I apologize for that. Aaron is the author of the book, Finding Kansas. He wrote this before he was living independently. Today, this third session that you've joined us on is about living independently, but Aaron's book has been extremely insightful for individuals on the spectrum, family members, professionals, business leaders, people who study the field. Aaron has done a great job of capturing what his experience has been and made it accessible by sharing what he has gone through. I think has been very inspirational, and it's a poignant story, and appreciate you sharing that with the world. So if you're interested in learning more about the book itself, you can find that on Amazon. So by way of introduction, Aaron, let's talk a little bit about before you wrote the book. When did you find out you had autism? How old were you? What year that time?
December 03 was the diagnosis. And, growing up, I didn't think anything was different with me. I thought everyone else was different. So it was a big shock when, well, it wasn't the second I got diagnosed, it wasn't that big of a deal because my doctor didn't know what it was. He sent me to go get an assessment. Doctor read the assessment and said, "Yep, no doubt about it, you have Asperger's." I don't know what that means. Good luck. So, well, on the internet, information essentially said, "Give up. There's no hope," and put me into that situation for a good 15 months. But flip side of that, started writing. And as mentioned, when I wrote my book, I was living at home. So a lot of my writing was looking ahead on what would that be like, because I didn't think that would ever be a possibility.
Because you'd read on the internet that you were never going to have a job,
never have friends, and never be happy. So if those three are true, then it isn't that to think, well, living at home's all there is.
Yep, that was your only option at the time. So you wrote the book, and you have been talking publicly about your experience and given presentations. And I think it's always interesting for the audience to understand just how many times you've presented to how many different audiences, how many people, and what kinds of people have you presented to?
Yeah, so going on 1,035 presentations now, nearing 95,000 people spoken to. And the audiences, I love how varied, from teachers, school districts, student bodies. Love that audience. Although I have presented to kindergartners twice. They're the most intimidating audience. When I've presented to top levels of the FBI. And I even let them know, no offense to you, but kindergartners have you beat for intimidating audiences. Parents, support groups, conservation officers, a law firm. I mean, and it seems to who I'm presenting to.
So in addition to being an author, and you've got 3 or 4 other books already prepared, you're just looking to get published or get a publisher, and you're exploring the idea of self-publishing. And being a public speaker, and you've served for Easterseals Midwest when I was there, and now Easterseals Arkansas as an ambassador, an autism ambassador, sharing your information and your understanding to help inspire others and some help along the way. But you're also living your dream job. Let's talk about that for a minute, and how you got to this dream job of working for the Indianapolis 500, where you grew up 2 miles away from it as a kid.
You mentioned dream. That's exactly what it is. I never would have thought I would have got to that level, but it was a process. Just small growths. And that's been I guess the theme of my life, of just small steps that you don't even know you're on a journey, and you don't even know the destination's getting closer. So that's been a very unique thing. Once you get to the destination, you go, oh, well, there was this stop and that stop and that stop along the way. But when you're on that journey, you seem to be blind because the destination just seems so far away that it never seems like you're getting closer. But last year did become for the NTT IndyCar series, which includes the Indy 500. I look away each time because I try to grasp what that even means, because that's such a dream.
And it's a rare job. There's only been
6 or 7 starters for the Indy 500
60s.
since 1960.
So that puts you in rarefied air there, Aaron, and congratulations on that. That's fantastic. At one time, you wanted to be a race car driver.
Yes, and got close to that, which now I'm thinking, because had I lived that dream, who would I be helping? My bank account at the end of the race if I won, maybe, but there would be no traveling around the country presenting to everyone that needs to hear a message that, a person like me that said there was no hope for so long now says there is.
And you really struggled. There was like 15 months there where you were just in a deep depression, and writing about how you were feeling in your book helped you process a way that you couldn't do by verbalizing, correct?
Absolutely. The writing was my real way to communicate with the world, because I could state facts all day long, but I could not tell you what was going on the inside. Mm-hmm. And writing was that outlet.
So one of the ideas that you talk about in your book, well, it's the name of your book, Finding Kansas, the concept of Kansas. You do a great job of giving metaphors or analogies that describe things that make it easy. I love the concept of Kansas. So explain what that is, because I initially thought, oh, we're talking about the Wizard of Oz and finding Kansas and getting home, but it has a different meaning.
Yes, nothing to do with the physical state. I believe the DSM mentioned something along the lines of individuals on the autism spectrum will have an area of defined interest or knowledge that they're going to want to talk about to the exclusion of everything else. That's wordy. That's long. Instead, I say, if you were socially except Kansas, where would you want to live? The answer is going to be Kansas, because that's where I don't overprocess, I don't overthink, I can converse without delays, and Kansas is going to be the activity or interest that we're going to want to talk about for 2 hours, not take a breath and have no idea that you're not listening, but trust me when I say I'm going to have the time of my life. That takes a lot of oxygen in one breath, but when we start talking about Arkansas, yeah, we may start talking at that accelerated rate. We may know everything about the topic. We may go when I was younger, and sometimes now don't pick up on the social cues that those around may not exactly be listening. But for me, it might be the only thing my brain's thinking about on any given day.
And so your Kansas is that area of interest that you're passionate about. And, in talking to my own children and to people seeking advice from me, I always have talked about start with what you're most passionate about. And if you get paid to do that, it's like you're never working a day in your life. You've even said, I don't tell Indianapolis 500, but I'd pay to be able to be their flagman. Exactly.
I think I told you that a decade ago for sure.
Yeah. And so it wasn't an overnight success. I mean, you didn't all of a sudden just walk in one day and say, I'd like to be the Indianapolis 500 flagman. When did that journey start, learning about flagging, race directing, and all the things that went into that got you prepared for this incredible opportunity?
All the way back in 90. Well, the seeds were planted in 1990 when the flag was checkered flag. So way long ago, in 1995, I started racing, and the club flagman had issues knowing what color was which. He was in his mid 80s. I've actually looked him up online. He was flagging races in the late 40s. So
you were like his apprentice and got started?
Yes. And the club eventually, I was his apprentice. I volunteered to hand him the right colored flags.
Because you were getting paid for this. This was just a volunteer.
Yes.
Okay, got you.
And I'd hand him the right flag. And that first year, he let me do a heat race or two every now and then, which for me, I was on cloud nine. That was like, I was giddy. Following year, though, about a third of the way through the season, he was having more and more issues with the weather and the heat and being outside all day. So club sort of pushed him aside and gave me the role. So 13, became the club flagman. The pay was awesome, $25 a day. But thinking about that, I'm under 18, working in a dangerous job. There were probably lots of insurance and OSHA things that just weren't right there. I was having the time of my life, though, and the journey started back then.
Okay. So the moving from living at your parents' house to living independently, what was like the biggest challenge or adjustment you had, and how did you overcome that? Out on your own.
Moving out on my own itself wasn't a challenge in itself, because in 06 I started working a race series, so I was traveling about 8 times a year in the Midwest, 8 weekends a year, and then 2010 presenting for what was then Touch Point, traveling across the state of Missouri. So I had a lot of dry runs, so to speak, because I was on my, I was at home. So
you're doing a lot of traveling that kind of got you ready for that.
Yes. And another big instance of practice was in 07. I was working at a kart shop at the time, and he was traveling. He went to Italy for a week to meet a kart manufacturer, and he had a dog. So I stayed at his house and dog sat. So there were several instances where for an entire week, I was on my own in someone else's house. So that gave me the practice. Now, moving out in 2011, I'd say the hardest thing was food, the daily routine of food, keeping supplies up. I'd be lying if I said I mastered that, but food to this day remains a problem, on just what to do, how to prepare. But having those practice runs, so to speak, beforehand really helped.
So if we think about, we talked earlier in one of our sessions, either about the concept of the backpack, and and you're going on this journey and you're not sure when you're going to need a tool or a skill, and you're developing them and you're putting them in your backpack. As you think about living independently, what skills or tools do you wish you would have learned earlier, either in school or from your parents or people that were supporting you, that would have helped facilitate being able to live independently? Cooking, is that one of them?
Oh, definitely. That's the number one thing. That, going back to 7th grade, a major thing at project that we did in 7th grade was to, I don't even know what class this was, but it was simulating a bank account, and it was a multi-month project, but the teacher gave us X amount of dollars that we had to budget, and we all got fake checkbooks. It had to be, you got lost points if you didn't do everything the way you're supposed to write a check. That was huge for me.
So those financial management,
financial
budgeting,
management,
check writing skills.
Yes. So that in 7th grade, and that was actually, oddly enough, one of the few classes I actually enjoyed that were math or social studies.
Was it like Monopoly to you, and
yeah,
like a challenge?
It was a challenge, and it was something real world. And I understood, one of the few times I went, oh my goodness, I actually do need to know this. So I had to buy in to that. Having those skills when it came time to write a check, it was seamless.
Got it. So we've been hearing you talk about your job, both with one of the other race circuits you were on and the Indy racing series. There's travel in your job, and a lot of times you're traveling independently and all over the place. What has been some of the challenges to travel that you think is related to being on the spectrum for you?
Issues in traveling, definitely when the schedule falls apart, which if you travel enough or just travel once, it can happen.
So missing a connection, a delay.
Going to a race in Grand Junction, Colorado in 2013, it was St. Louis to Salt Lake to Grand Junction. A storm in St. Louis, we were delayed, and I'd never missed a flight before. I didn't know what happened if you miss it. And I got to play the biggest reject of an Olympic event, the 100-gate dash. It's not a pleasant game. I had to go, and of course, anytime you're late, you have to go from one extreme end to the other extreme end. And I'm running in. I had my computer bag because I still had to blog, and I had my flag bag. Couldn't forget that. So I'm running. I'm halfway there, and I have about 5 minutes left. And in my mind, if I miss this flight, it's going to a flight. 1-day tickets cost like $1,000 to go somewhere. So if I miss this flight, I'm stuck in Salt Lake City for all time. That was my perception. I run. I'm running faster. I'm huffing. I don't have any energy left. I go down the final escalator to the E gates, to E82, and I get to the counter, and I'm at the right one. I go, oh, did I make it? Well, he says, so I all but collapse. And then she looks over the counter and says, but there's another flight in 90 minutes. You're already booked. So there was all this panic that it was the end of everything I knew. I'd be fired from the race series for not making it. I'd have to pay at least $1,000 to leave Salt Lake City, but it was already taken care of.
So you have a tendency, I gather, that sometimes you awfulize things and think about what is the absolute worst possible thing that could happen.
All the time.
Yeah, what's been your strategy for talking yourself off the ledge, or having someone you know to help talk you off the ledge?
It's still something that
you're working on.
Struggle with to this day. I did a blog post back in 2010 It was about the NBC special report intro. Those eerie chimes breaking in, and I'm not the only one that called them this, but the chimes of death. It's, you hear that, you instantly go, well, a comet that nobody saw is 1 hour away from hitting the Earth.
Because that signaled a special news report on the television.
Yes.
Bing, 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 or something like that. And
yes.
now here comes some
And
bad news.
Oh, always bad news.
Yeah.
And jumping to that worst possible, it's the end of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I still struggle with to this day, on jumping straight to the worst possible outcome. For that is processing for us on the autism spectrum can take longer. So if you already are thinking of the worst, you can't be caught off guard. You've already planned, or your brain's trying to plan for the worst case scenario, which, living on your own, that can up the amount of potential things that you're processing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sounds at night. If the air conditioner starts making a clinking noise, okay, is the whole house falling apart? Is that actually someone in the house? There's so many more be thought of that can be a little disconcerting.
Got it. And is there a role that your parents have played in helping you navigate these things when things happen, or do you have a friend or a buddy that you rely on, or how do you, when you're not sure what to do?
For me, it's, I'll try to verbalize what it is. So talking about it can help for sure. It can be hard to talk about it, definitely, but trying to verbalize what the worst case thinking is going on.
Okay. As we go, for those of you just joining, I'm here with Aaron Likens, and we're talking about what it's like to be on the autism spectrum and living independently. And we'll be taking questions. So if you have questions, we'll try to get them answered while we're live here. So hit us up in the Q&A box on the webinar or on Facebook Live if you're joining that way. Here's one. It says, what was your biggest fear of living on your own?
Fear of living on my own. Simply just not knowing what to do. Which looking back, that mountain to climb, so to speak, I made it much taller than it actually was, but just not knowing what to do if any unforeseen event happened. When you're at home, that gets taken care of.
Sort of magically by the parental fairies that solve problems for you.
And on your own, you know, if even something as simple as, okay, the dishwasher threw too much soap out, what do you do? The sink stops up, what do you do? Just very simple things like that seemed overwhelming.
So examples like that, you know, like a busted pipe or the dishwasher, can you remember a specific instance when you have this novel situation, you don't know what to do? And what did you do to address it? How did you handle that?
Well, really the only issue I had at my house, a bird had gotten into the vent system and it didn't make it. And it stayed there a while. So there was
an odor.
Yes, a not so good odor in the house. And for individuals on the spectrum, when leaving home, it's still important to have a support system. I had no idea. I live in a townhome, so there's an association. I don't know who owns, I mean, I've heard you own the air, but not the wall. So I have this issue. So I had to call my dad and say, there's this, there's no way. And I'm not mechanics, screwdrivers, not my area. So and even still, there was the duct it was in curved, it went up. It was in an impossible place. So it resulted let's call the owners of the property. And it was a process. That didn't just the fix wasn't overnight, but it required people to come out and use a tool to get through all that. And
so what lesson did you learn from that experience that maybe helped you with future challenges, or that you think will help you?
It's okay to ask for help.
It's okay to ask for help.
It is absolutely okay to ask for help.
And that's been a challenge for you, right?
Yes, it has, in many different environments. I've started telling, and one of the toughest travel instances I've had, and this goes for, interacting with people, not knowing what potentially is going on. I found this incredible deal at the end of 2018. I think it was a glitch on Delta system, but for less miles than it would have been to go to St. Louis to Kansas City, I had Tokyo round trip.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it was hours notice. I went to Tokyo, which that right there, I want to prove a point. That to me is much easier than simply, I think going back to the 2000s traveling, I had done that so much.
You were used to the process and the script. And
I was used to that. And traveling, I do try to remain invisible. When you're asking for help at home, you become visible. So when you were in Tokyo, one of the world's most populated cities, did you feel invisible, or yes.
were you overwhelmed?
It's actually one of the quietest cities I've been to. I walked past a construction site, and there was actually a decibel meter, and they're fined over there if they go so loud. So just this megapolis, really, and it is eerily quiet. But when I was leaving there, when I was trying to board the plane, and I say trying, I got stopped on the jet bridge, which was odd. That had never happened before. You can get the extra security at security, but I got the extra security on the jet bridge. They were waiting for me.
Wow.
So they wanted me to take my shoes off and then put them on. Put them off, take them on. Continue, belt off, belt on. I traveled enough that I wasn't getting concerned. But the thing I was concerned about was the plane just now went on 20 minutes. And the flight now was 5 minutes scheduled to leave. And they wanted me to take the stuff out of my bag and put it in. This just kept going. And I was getting concerned now because this was just what's going on. Well, now the plane's 3 minutes past scheduled departure time. There's nobody else boarding the plane. They're waiting on me.
You.
Yes. The end result, I'm a horrible traveler because they didn't know what my Xbox One was. So I get on the plane, and when you're late on a plane, you get some odd looks. People weren't happy with me, and all the overhead bins were full, so there was no place for my bag. So I caught a flight attendant's attention and pointed at my bag and went like that. And she said, "Well, sir, if you would have been on sooner, you wouldn't have this problem." I'm now over the edge on frustration. So I eventually they find a place for it. I sit down and I'm trying to decompress. And when I try to decompress, when I'm over the limit on stress and anxiety, I just become as stoic as possible. That caught one of the flight attendants' level of concern. So they come over and get right in my face and say, "Sir, can you fly?" Okay, I can take things literally. I have 6 lessons in a plane called a Katana. I cannot fly a boat. I'm stuck processing, why do they want me to fly this airplane? What they meant was I mentally able to fly? So I didn't answer. Flight attendant leaves. 5 minutes later, every flight attendant in the plane shows up at my seat saying, "Sir, you are acting weird. Are you okay?"
Wow.
I eventually was able to say, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just security was it was difficult. I'm fine." Thankfully, they believed me, and I was on that flight. But had I not had all the practice on traveling before, you travel enough, curveballs
Yep.
are going to happen. You know, I might have been a little bit more suspicious. They might not have let me on that flight. And then, I mean, what type of snowball effect would that have been? So, living independently, I just don't want to jump into it. That practice I had idle, because when things do go awry, you want as many tools, as many experiences that you can cling to handle the current situation, because there's no dry run for that type of security. I didn't even know security at that point could happen like that.
Yeah. So part of your experience traveling was with your dad. Your dad traveled internationally, and rather than not bring you along, you tagged along and went on a lot of international trips. So you got an opportunity to see it being modeled. How
That helped immensely for my trips. In 04, we went to Lithuania. 05 went to Kenya, and then 06 went to Madagascar and Kenya again, which my book was actually, the final chapter was actually written in Kisumu, Kenya.
Oh, in Kenya.
Yeah. So actually about 4 of the chapters are written from there. But having those experiences, one, gave me a bigger love of travel in the world, that I'm interested in seeing as many places as possible. But having those experiences, and my dad and I, we had several curveballs on previous trips of things just going horribly awry, but we made it through the other side. And that big part of the thing in Tokyo happening,
Yep.
being able to get through it.
Got it. We have a question here from a viewer. I think I might recognize this. My son, Jacob Ekstrand, is watching, and he's asking you, how has the awareness and understanding of autism changed since you were first diagnosed to today? And do you think there are still some things missing from that understanding?
One, what has changed since 03? The good thing now is when I tell somebody I have Asperger's, back in 04, 05, people say, "Wait, did you say you ate a hamburger? What did you say?" We have come a long ways from hamburger syndrome. Thank goodness. People would say back then, "Oh, could you describe that in a few words?" Few words? You should see the unabridged version of my book. There is now a level of awareness. And I think where we're lacking is the awareness and understanding. I think we have done a very good job at aware. People know the name now. You say autism you say autism and maybe Asperger's, people are going to have an awareness of. But when you say autism spectrum, that's when there's still a level of fog. And I don't think we can have true understanding till people are aware of that it is a spectrum. My challenges being independent and traveling abroad are going to be different than another person. A person may have the same diagnosis as myself and have absolutely no issues maintaining the household, cooking, no problems with that, but may have a strong issue trying to get through TSA security. Same diagnosis as myself, may have no issues at either and be able to live independently, cook, clean, all that, and travel seamlessly. So it's very difficult for somebody that isn't affiliated with the spectrum in one way or another, whether through a job or personal encounters, understanding two people, same diagnosis, completely different challenges and strengths. that media scripted shows, I think, have done a poor job on. If a person is on the spectrum or written to be on the spectrum, but not really on the spectrum, but everybody knows they are, you're always looking at someone that's going to be some sort of rocket scientist or something of in the science world, where that's not going to be the story for everyone.
Got it. Like Sheldon on the Big Bang Theory.
Exactly.
So, question here coming from probably a parent. What advice young adult with a disability, with autism, that may be apprehensive about their child living on their own? How can they help with the transition to independent living?
The exactly how to help in terms of what steps, that I don't know exactly what steps, because if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person. I will say though, you'll want to give them as much practice as possible. One of our challenges being on the spectrum is the fail. If we try something once and we fail, in our mind, we're always going to fail. One of my sayings is, whatever is now is forever. So I've heard this from so many parents in terms of individuals that got a scholarship to wherever they want to go. They go 10 state or maybe across the country, but that independent living, that being able to support oneself on their own, just hasn't been cultivated and worked on. So you have someone with so much potential, but really lacking in the category.
Mm-hmm.
They go off. That first semester at college is a complete disaster. They come home, they don't try again. That's what we struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
Whether someone that was valedictorian or someone like myself that struggled in school later on, you get that first attempt. If that first attempt just ends in disaster, find that motivation to try again. Just like my diagnosis, when I read that on the internet that there was no hope, that created the fail set mindset for me. It took 15 months and then writing a book to convince me otherwise.
Got it. Let's see here. Here's a question from one of our viewers. How have you surprised yourself since you started living on your own?
Surprised myself. The fact that come October, it will be a decade. That I didn't think that would happen. So it's been a shock and a surprise. My ability to travel too, I can't believe that. I think back to when I wrote my book, and just when I was writing my book, just so the people watching understand, I traveled to 2 places really: the racetrack 10 times a year and the bowling alley. That was it. There was no other places I went. Very, very small. So to go from that to, I had a plane ticket before the pandemic, right at the end of 2019. It was the most complicated. I had about 20 flight legs and 7 different places I went for different presentation, a racetrack, presentation, racetrack, presentation, all without stopping back at home.
Oh, wow.
So people not on the autism spectrum, when I would show tickets, they'd look at that and go, how can you do that? For me, that's easy for me. This is probably a unique contrast. Being at home got to the point I don't know what to do with food, sleep schedule. That's a struggle when I'm at home. But when I'm on the road, go, that's easy for me. So it's such a contrast that what others may struggle at, and then what others just pick up naturally. Using a microwave, if it says 3 to 4 minutes,
which is it?
What is it? And it isn't. I mean, I can laugh about it. about myself on that, but I'll sit there debating for 10 minutes. What is the right answer? And then out comes the phone and I'm door dashing something.
Okay. So here's another question from one of our viewers. Your initial fear when you first read about Asperger's, one of the things was that you wouldn't have any friends. Has that doomsday prediction come true? And if not, tell us a little bit about the people you have befriended.
It didn't come true. And the odd thing is in 2004, I started racing on Xbox Live, and I had all these people that I raced with every day. And here I am. Even then I said, there's no hope. I don't have any friends. And I was racing with the same 12 people every single day. So to be so blind to the fact that the people I raced with, my friend Rob, we've been friends since 2004. He's from Vancouver, and I went to the Olympics in 2010. He gave me a ticket, so we went to an event there, and he's been my co-pilot on my 2 national tours that I've done across the country. But racing with him in 2004, I was still under the mindset that, oh, it's doomsday, there's no friends. So that's been a real blessing. It was easy on there for me. Of course, the online culture wasn't as toxic as it is today. But when you're on a racing game, they like racing, I like racing, natural common ground to start talking. And many of my friends are online. And of course, the race series I work with many people I consider friends.
Great. Have you picked up any new hobbies since you've been living on your own? And have you found that you're more open to trying things?
Actually, I'm going to embarrass myself, but no.
Nope.
Video games still reign supreme. I wish I could give a better answer than that, but
what about the second part, being open to new things? Because I've known you a long time and we've gone out, and it seems to me, at least from my observation, that you are open to trying new things and having new experiences.
Yes, and I guess I'm hung up on the question in terms of living independently. In terms of travel, try new restaurants, try new foods. Before, one of the most critical blog posts that nobody would even recognize was in 2011, the first time I tried Mexican food. That opened up my not being so rigid, because the people I work with now, it's all Mexican all the time. And that going back to the employment piece, that the politics of just coworkers and that dynamic, or the previous segment, that if I would have got my dream job back then, I wouldn't have been ready for it had I got it 10 years ago. And that's absolutely true, because I was still so rigid that, okay, if every single meal you're saying, oh, this isn't going to work for me, this isn't going to work for me, that wears on people, even if they don't don't consciously. If you're constantly saying, hey, I'm out, that registers with people. So yeah, the exposure to new foods, for sure, because I didn't before 2011. It was, well, I eat this and that's that. But when you travel enough, like I did presenting across Missouri, your options sometimes in a very small town are extremely limited, which was a gigantic blessing for me. At the time, I was looking at my Garmin. Remember the Garmin?
Oh, yeah.
My Garmin tried to drive me into rivers 3 times. I'd be looking, okay, where's the nearest McDonald's? And it'd say 50 miles. Okay, I'm not driving 100 miles round trip so it was such a blessing to get my feet wet across Missouri, presenting, and sometimes having limited options. At the time, I thought this is just horrible, but really it was teaching me be open.
Got it. So you mentioned your Garmin GPS. Let's kind of update it to today. You've got a smartphone. Are there any apps that you use that have helped you eating, travel? What are a couple of your favorite apps that you find useful for preparing for some new experience? Do you look at like Google Maps? Do you use like Yelp or things to review restaurants? Or
I don't review restaurants in advance. Google Maps, though, where I'm going, I will look ahead and see where things are. But I wish I had a fancier answer than when I am traveling. Take a race, for example. Take this past I was in New Orleans this past weekend. Pretty much all I saw was airport, hotel, racetrack, hotel, racetrack, hotel, racetrack, hotel, airport. I put so much energy into what I'm doing that going out really isn't something. And same thing with presenting. It's I devote so much energy into the presentation that afterwards I'm drained. And hotel, DoorDash, that's the app.
DoorDash.
Yeah.
Okay. I love the DoorDash as well. Here's a great question from one of our viewers. As you look to the next decade, what are some of your personal goals that you might be interested in sharing with us? What's next for you?
What's next? That is hard. I think maybe after in 2009 when when I consulted for you through the parent training program, I think you asked me that question somewhere in 09 or 010. You asked that question, and I don't know how to do those. What's now is forever, and to try to come up with a goal, it's like trying to quantify oblivion. It's just so hard. I mean, I'm trying right now, trying to think, and just imagine a thought going up into the sky and just exploding like a firework, and trying to get one part of it. It's just
too big, too broad.
Even if it were a small goal, and that's why I think until I finally convinced myself I could have a place of my own, it was impossible to conceive because it's just so grand in nature. I would say I'd like to try to cut down on the DoorDash, and when I'm home, be able to prepare meals myself. DoorDash is very expensive.
Yep.
So somehow learning how to do that, but when dealing with one to 2 cups of milk, okay, what I need something more precise. And
got it.
Big phobia of the decision making, and then I get stuck in the processing game, and DoorDash happens.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, you probably didn't come up with the answer, I want to be flagging the Indianapolis 500.
Well, I wanted to, but there was no concept that it was even
achievable.
Possible.
I see.
I mentioned my trip to Tokyo.
Yeah.
Like to do is, or that I surprised myself on what I was able to do. I wrote a travel book that hasn't been published yet, but some of my best writing. But my last trip was going to be a mystery to me. I had done 4 trips prior, and my 5th trip, I wanted to push myself, and I think neurotypicals would just run away from this challenge. But I didn't know where I was going till 24 hours before the trip. I had what I called the consortium make this trip, which you were on, and I ended up going to Iceland. 16, had no idea I was going there. I had 15 white envelopes that each day I'd open up an envelope that have what my itinerary that day was going to be in. I ended up presenting in Iceland, not knowing I was presenting there until the date of. Presented at a Rotary Club in a town name I can't pronounce. But could I have done that 10 years ago? Absolutely not. But, well, I don't think many people would seek out that type of challenge, as is. The end result was I drove around the of Iceland, which was a really rewarding experience, having no idea where I was going each day.
Yeah. Yep.
And that contrast is just so beautiful, and something that most people would just run away from at full speed and not want. Who in their right mind would say, yeah, I'll let a group of 6 other people to make a trip for me. I don't know where I'm going, but not something most people would sign up for. And yet some such as
Throws you for a loop.
Throws me to where I can't function with it.
Got it. How about this? Here's an interesting question. We haven't gotten into this in either one of our other sessions. Do you have any stories or advice to address social or romantic relationships with respect to living independently?
No, well, I am the wrong person to ask for that, because my first relationship, I broke via text message just to see if they liked me, not understanding that if they liked me before, maybe they wouldn't like me after.
I see.
So I am the last person in the world that should be. And I told myself, and I joked in presentations, hey, I know how not to break up, not via text message. And in 2013, in February, I broke up via text message. Although I avoided the holiday, February, I avoided President's Day.
What day was it?
Oh, I avoided that one as well.
Okay. I have a question for you. When you're out in the community, just like shopping or just doing something that you have to do, getting food, what are some of the most difficult situations that you've encountered, and how do you overcome those?
The checkout line.
The checkout line?
The checkout line. You go back onto my blog in 2010, and I don't know how many terror on checkout aisle 3 type blog posts there were, but just the random conversation. The random interactions for me, I struggle with. Even simple, how are yous? Okay, what is, just like the microwave on 1 to 2 minutes, how are you? Okay, what is the criteria? Some people actually mean it and will listen to a person speak for 20 minutes when they describe exactly how they are. But then, okay, what is the criteria? The past hour, past 6 hours, past month? And right now, if you ask anyone and their criteria is the past year, well, this is uncharted territory. Pandemic. So I don't know how to answer that. And I struggle. So people think I'm telling a joke when I say I'm here, but that's exactly how I'm doing. I am here. So I'm stating a fact, and people think I'm joking, but if I don't give that answer, I may go into a 5-minute story that goes nowhere explaining how I'm doing in that moment.
And in your book, that's a concept you describe as like game theory, right? Where in a social interaction, you don't necessarily know what the other person's going to do, but in where you know the rules, you know the role you're playing, you're more comfortable. Like people might say, well, how are you able to have this interview? You're playing a game, that you have an alias, and you're Aaron, the public speaker, the autism ambassador, so you're able to answer. So in those unstructured situations, describe what that's like for you, the challenge there.
Imagine putting 4 different board games on the Monopoly board at once and trying to play all 4 games. Battleship, Monopoly, and let's throw Othello out there as well and try to make sense of it. I mean, you land on Boardwalk, it's also a triple word space. You also flip some white tiles over, and there's a king being checked by the knight in community chest. But you also want to do a trade. But there's also too many hotels on Boardwalk, so the rules aren't being followed. That's what the chaos of open-ended questions are like. Trying to make sense of something that my brain just can't get a hold of, can't make sense of. And the end, it's like trying to process and comprehend the infinite factor, because in a conversation where there isn't structure, anything could be said next. And my brain is always trying to stay one step ahead to mitigate, to negate the processing. And when things just don't go according to plan, such as how are you, it just throws the cogs in the brain just cease to move and get that rhythm back.
So not being able to pick up the context or the nuance or the nonverbals is a challenge. And so you kind of feel like you're making a move, but you don't know what the other person's move even means.
Playing chess blind is the best way to where you can see your pieces, but every opponent piece you can't see. You are flying completely blind in the game. You can see the opponent, but you can't see their pieces. You have to move. You have to participate in if you just did a good move or a move that's going to cost you the game.
Got it. Here's another question. When you get together with friends or family or have some folks over, you go over to someone's house, what are the kinds of things that you enjoy to do?
Games, and more games.
Again, because of the structure.
Because of the structure, I find it easier to socialize within a game because 90% of the talk is game. The other 10%, I guess it would be a slower conversation, whereas if it's just 10 people mingling in a room. Oh, no.
Got you.
I struggle in that environment, but in the confines of a game, the socializing that does go on is at a slower and more structured pace.
So in terms of, I have a question here about travel. Where have you traveled internationally, and what's been some of your favorite places that you've been to?
4 weeks ago, I was in Mexico, training staff down there at a kart track on how to flag with U.S. procedures. Iceland twice, Netherlands, England for 16 hours. Tokyo twice, Madagascar twice, Kenya twice, Mauritius, and Reunion Island, which is the most fantastic place.
Well, that sounds amazing, and I'm sure you have some amazing stories that you've written in a book, which has yet to be published. I can't wait to read that book.
Yes, I mentioned curveball. Every one of my trips just had something off the wall happen to me.
Well, I can't wait to read the book. If there's any of you out there who are, publishers or editors and want to reach out to us, Aaron's looking for someone to help edit it to get it ready for publishing. And I don't know anything about that. So sorry, I can't help you on that, Aaron. But we're going to wrap up. That's going to have to be our last question. We're at the end of our time. And so I just want to thank you all for joining and tuning into Independent Living with our guest, Aaron Likens. We hope you leave with some more insight, understanding, and acceptance, and perhaps some ideas that you can put into practice on your own. We would encourage you to learn more about Aaron and his speaking, his book and that, as well as the services we here at Easterseals provide to support people to live independently in the community by checking out our website or Aaron's website, which is aaronlikens.com. Recording of this and the other 2 webinars in our series will be available on Arkansas's YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe and like our video. And again, thank you for tuning in. And Aaron, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great. Thank you.